Hey everyone, and welcome to this deep dive. We're going to be exploring the world of knowledge types
Yes.
and how to really use these different types to level up your research.
Yeah,
You sent over some really fascinating research materials about this, and we're going to unpack them all for you today.
absolutely. And, we're going to go way beyond just defining what knowledge is.
Right.
We're going to look at it like it's a toolkit, you know,
I like that.
a toolkit that can transform how you approach research.
Yeah. And our guide for this journey is Zenson Tran's book, Mastering Knowledge. Have you heard of this one?
Oh, absolutely. It's a classic.
It is a comprehensive guide for researchers to harness diverse knowledge types. That's the full title.
Hmm.
And he really breaks it down. He identifies 7 distinct types of knowledge, each with its own unique strengths.
Yes. And what I find so fascinating is how Tran shows how they actually intertwine,
Okay.
how they create almost like a symphony of perspectives that can lead to much richer and more impactful research.
Ooh, I like that. A symphony of knowledge. Okay, so before we jump into these 7 types,
Yeah.
let's take a step back. How has knowledge even evolved over time?
Well, knowledge has always been at the heart of human progress, right? I mean,
Mhm.
think about it from those early cave paintings,
Right.
conveying stories and signals across generations to complex systems of knowledge in ancient civilizations.
Because cave paintings were the original social media posts, right?
Exactly. Then,
Sharing hunting tips, telling stories, all with the tribe.
yeah. And then when we shifted, from those oral traditions to written records,
Right.
the way we stored and transmitted knowledge,
Yeah.
radical transformation.
Huge. What about the printing press?
Oh, think about the impact of that.
Yeah,
Suddenly, knowledge was no longer confined to a privileged few,
totally. The Gutenberg Revolution was knowledge democratization.
precisely. And now, today, in the digital age, we're facing an explosion of information.
Right.
But the challenge isn't just access anymore,
hmm
it's discerning quality, making connections, and transforming all that data into something meaningful.
Okay, so it's like we've come full circle, right?
In a way, yes.
We're back to that challenge of making sense of the world, but
Right.
but with this whole new set of tools and a much vaster landscape.
Absolutely.
Okay, but before we get too far ahead, I think we need to define what we even mean by knowledge.
You're right. We use that word all the time.
Right.
But what about like data,
Yeah.
information, knowledge? What's the difference?
Totally. It's like having a bunch of ingredients, a recipe, and then the fully baked cake.
I like that.
You need all 3, but they have different roles, right?
Okay, so let's say you're trying to understand climate change.
Okay.
So you might start with tons of data,
Mm-hmm.
temperature readings, sea level measurements, carbon emissions reports. But that's just the raw stuff.
It's like a pantry full of ingredients, but no idea what to make.
Exactly. Exactly.
Mhm.
Now, when you analyze that data, look for patterns. That's when you start to get information. Like you notice global temperatures are rising. That's information.
Okay, so we're moving from just ingredients to a recipe. We're seeing how things are connected.
Right. But knowledge is taking that information and understanding the why.
Okay.
Why are temperatures rising?
Mm.
What are the causes,
Yeah.
consequences, and what can we do about it?
So knowledge is like that baker's intuition, right? Not just
Oh,
the ingredients, but how to combine them to make that perfect cake.
exactly.
Understanding the nuances and implications.
Yes. Knowledge is making connections, seeing the bigger picture, and turning that information into something we can use.
I like that. Okay, so I think we've got a solid foundation here.
Yeah.
We've looked at how knowledge has evolved. We've untangled the difference between data, information, and knowledge. And now,
Now for those 7 types.
yes, let's unlock that toolbox. What's the first one?
Let's start with factual knowledge.
Okay, factual knowledge. What makes this type so important?
Well, I always think of it as the bedrock, like you're building a research skyscraper. You need to make sure that foundation is strong
Oh.
before you add those fancy architectural flourishes.
No shaky foundations. Got it. What are the ingredients of this bedrock?
Well, first, you need precise definitions. Think of them like blueprints guiding the construction.
Okay.
Like, let's say, climate change research.
Right.
If you're using terms like carbon footprint, everyone needs to know exactly what you mean.
So a shared language, making sure we're all on the same page.
Exactly. Next, you need solid data, the bricks and mortar.
Okay.
This could be numbers, statistics, or qualitative data like interviews.
So not just any bricks. High quality, carefully sourced materials.
Precisely. And then we can't forget historical trends,
Right.
the history of our research building, understanding what's happened in the past.
It's like seeing how architectural styles have evolved over time, right? learning from the successes and failures.
Exactly. And finally, we have those established theories, like the load-bearing beams.
Okay.
These are frameworks tested and validated, widely accepted.
So the intellectual giants. Okay. But where do we find this factual knowledge?
Well, textbooks, for one, comprehensive overviews,
Uh,
and often explain complex concepts in an easier way.
so they're like those knowledgeable tour guides giving us a roadmap.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, for raw data,
Yes.
databases are amazing.
Mm.
Think about the World Bank's data portal or government census websites packed with numbers.
So if you need to crunch numbers, databases are your friend.
They are your best friend.
But what about the cutting edge stuff?
Ah, yes, for that. Journals,
Okay.
academic and scientific journals, websites like PubMed or Google Scholar.
So journals are like those expeditions taking us to the frontiers of knowledge.
Precisely.
Okay.
Now, for initial explorations, or quick overviews,
Right.
encyclopedias can be really helpful. But remember to double check the references.
Good point. Can't take everything at face value.
Exactly.
Okay. So gathering factual knowledge is just the first step.
It is.
How do we use it effectively? We don't want it to get dusty, right?
Well, factual knowledge is like that trusty hammer. Essential, but not enough on its own. We need other tools.
Okay. I'm ready for those power tools.
One of the most important is fact-checking. Always, and I mean always, triangulate your sources.
Triangulate. So find at least 2 other reliable sources.
At least 2. It's like checking our compass from different angles.
Got it. What about dates?
Oh, crucial. That statistic from 10 years ago might not be relevant today.
Like making sure our ingredients are fresh.
Yes. And once your facts are straight, think about presentation.
Right.
Don't just dump all that data. Summarize. Use visuals.
No one wants a data swamp.
Exactly. Make it digestible. And always, always document your sources.
Citations are BFFs.
Yes. Now, remember to ask yourself, so what? After every fact, how does it contribute to your research question, your argument?
So it's not just sitting there, it's actively working for us.
Exactly. Factual knowledge is the foundation, but we need those other types.
Okay, so we've laid the groundwork. Now let's bring in the human element.
That's where experiential knowledge comes in.
Okay.
The stories, the lived experiences, the stuff that brings data to life.
It's like reading a definition of poverty versus hearing someone's story of overcoming hardship.
Right? Precisely. It's about going beyond the numbers to understand the why and the how of human behavior.
So where do we find this experiential knowledge? It's not always in databases, is it?
Well, in-depth interviews are a great way. A well-structured interview can be a goldmine.
Right.
Your chance to really dig into someone's perspective.
So asking those open-ended questions, getting people to share in their own words.
Exactly. And sometimes it's those unplanned tangents that lead to the best insights.
It's like when you're traveling and you go off the beaten path.
Yes, you never know what you'll find. And focus groups are great too.
Right. Bringing people together to share.
Exactly. Now, another source is field observations, spending time in the environment you're studying.
So like a research fly on the wall, seeing how things play out in the real world.
Precisely. All this is qualitative research, exploring the nuances of human experience.
Adding those vibrant colors to our research palette.
Now, using experiential knowledge is incredibly powerful. It provides context, makes your research relatable.
It's like turning a research report into a documentary.
Exactly. And sometimes it reveals those unexpected variables you hadn't even considered.
Like those hidden puzzle pieces that suddenly complete the picture.
Exactly. And it builds trust with your audience
Yeah.
when they see you've listened to real people's stories.
So it's not just data-driven, it's human-centered.
Yes.
Okay, so we've got facts, we've got feels. What's next?
Let's move on to procedural knowledge.
Okay, procedural knowledge.
If factual knowledge is the what and experiential is the why, procedural is the how,
Okay.
the methods, the techniques, like a detailed instruction manual.
Got it.
If you're baking a cake, you need the right ingredients, proportions, and baking time.
Right.
Procedural knowledge makes sure your research cake doesn't fall flat.
So where do we find this procedural wisdom? Is there a secret society of research methods gurus?
Uh-huh. Well, maybe. But there are much more accessible sources, like handbooks and guides.
Okay.
They delve into specific methodologies, whether it's qualitative, quantitative, or mixed methods.
Like taking a masterclass from your desk.
Exactly. And in lab settings, you'll often find detailed protocols, every step outlined, like time-tested recipes passed down through generations of scientists.
So we're all baking from the same recipe book.
Precisely. And don't forget about technical manuals.
Right.
Software equipment.
Yeah.
They're your guides to success.
So this procedural knowledge It's like a superpower.
It allows us to design robust experiments,
Yep.
you know, ensure our research is replicable, avoid those pitfalls.
And it makes our research more efficient, right?
Much more efficient. You're not wasting time figuring things out as you go.
It's like a well-oiled machine.
Exactly.
Right.
Now, how do we actually apply this knowledge?
Right. Put it into action.
Create checklists. Before any task, write out each step. It might seem tedious, but trust me.
Like guardrails keeping us on track.
Exactly. And document everything. Keep a detailed record of your process.
So we can retrace our steps.
Exactly. If something goes wrong, you'll be able to figure out why.
It's like a research time machine.
And remember, research is iterative. Don't be afraid to tweak your procedures.
Okay.
The key is to document those changes. Share your knowledge with others.
So it's not about being rigid. It's about being adaptable.
Exactly. And don't be afraid of peer review. Get feedback.
Collaboration is key.
It is. It's like having a team of mechanics fine-tuning our research engine.
But we need to zoom out and see the bigger picture too, right?
Absolutely. That's where conceptual knowledge comes in.
Okay, I'm ready to get conceptual.
Right.
What does it entail and why is it so important?
Conceptual knowledge is about understanding those underlying theories, models, and frameworks that help us make sense of the findings.
Okay, so it's like the blueprint that shows how all the parts fit together.
Precisely. Let's say you're researching social media and mental well-being. You need a theoretical framework to guide you. You can't just throw data points in a blender.
We need that recipe.
Exactly. Conceptual knowledge helps us identify those key concepts. Things like, social comparison, online community, self-esteem.
Right.
And it helps us figure out how they relate to each other. We're creating a map of the research landscape.
Mapping out the constellations of our research. I like that.
Yeah. But where do we find this knowledge? It doesn't just appear.
Right. Where's the source?
One great source is analytical papers, especially peer-reviewed ones.
Okay.
They often delve into those deep theoretical discussions, presenting new models or refining existing ones.
So it's like getting a peek inside other researchers' minds, seeing how they framed their thinking.
Exactly. And don't underestimate visual representations, things like mind maps.
Visual aids always helpful.
Right. And for a comprehensive overview of existing theories, literature reviews are your best friend.
Ah, those deep dives into the existing research. Love those.
They are essential. Now, why is this type of knowledge so important? Why do we care about theories?
Yeah, what's the practical value?
Well, for one, conceptual knowledge helps us interpret our findings. Without it, our data might feel random. But with the right framework, we can see those patterns emerge, connect the dots.
It's like turning a pile of bricks into a beautiful building.
Precisely. And if you're hoping to make a real contribution to your field, conceptual knowledge is how you do it.
Okay.
By proposing a new model, you're shaping how others think about a problem.
Like leaving your mark on the intellectual landscape.
Exactly. And it encourages interdisciplinary thinking.
Okay.
Many frameworks draw on ideas from different fields: sociology, psychology, economics, and more.
So we're cross-pollinating our research with ideas from different fields.
Exactly. And another benefit is it streamlines your research process. It's like having a roadmap.
Keeps us focused.
Yes. Prevents those detours down unproductive paths, like a research GPS.
Okay, I'm ready to get conceptual. How do we create our own framework?
Start with a big research question. What's the core puzzle you're trying to solve?
Okay, break it down into those building blocks.
Exactly. And then start sketching out those relationships between those concepts. How do they connect?
Creating our own research map. Love it.
Exactly. Don't be afraid to get creative. Use visuals, sticky notes, mind maps, whatever works.
Get those ideas flowing.
And once you have a draft, share it.
Right. Feedback is key.
It is. It can help you refine your thinking. The next step is to test your framework.
Okay.
See if it holds up in the real world. Operationalize those concepts. Make them measurable.
Turning those abstract ideas into data points.
Precisely. And as you gather data, check back with your framework. Does it still make sense?
So it's a living document, evolving as we learn more.
Exactly. Remember, the world is complex. Don't be afraid to add complexity to your framework.
Our framework is a dynamic map.
Yes. But how do we make sure others understand our framework?
Right. How do we communicate those ideas effectively?
Visuals are key. A clear diagram can do wonders.
Right.
And tell a story. Explain your logic, your choices.
Bring it to life.
Exactly. Now, we've covered a lot here, from facts and figures to these big conceptual framework.
We have.
It's a lot to take in, but each type adds a different layer.
It's like building a research masterpiece, brick by brick.
Precisely. But there's one more type we haven't talked about: tacit knowledge.
Ah, yes, the mysterious realm of unspoken expertise. I'm ready to unlock its secrets.
All right. It's that secret sauce,
Yeah.
that comes from years of experience,
Okay.
like that gut feeling a doctor has, or
Right.
the way a chef knows a dish is seasoned
You
perfectly.
just know.
Exactly. It's not something you can easily write down, but it's so valuable.
But how do we even capture this? We can't download it from someone's brain, can we?
You're right. Not that simple. But there are ways to tap into it.
Okay, tell me, how do we capture this secret sauce?
One way is through those in-depth interviews with experts,
Mm-hmm.
but you have to ask the right questions.
Right.
Don't just ask what they know. Ask them how they know it.
Right.
What cues do they notice? What rules of thumb?
So getting them to articulate those unspoken insights.
Exactly. And sometimes observing them in action is even better.
Yeah, like watching them work.
Yeah, shadowing a practitioner. You can see those habits, those decisions they might not even be aware of.
Like a research apprentice learning by watching.
Precisely. And don't forget about your own tacit knowledge.
Oh, right.
Take time to reflect. Think back on your experiences.
Okay.
Ask yourself, why did that project succeed? What did I learn from that failure?
So it's not just about learning from others, it's mining our own experiences.
Exactly. Now, why is this important for research? Well, it helps us uncover those hidden dynamics.
The stuff that's not in textbooks.
Exactly. It can save us from making mistakes
Right.
or overlooking crucial details.
So it's like a secret weapon, an advantage.
And it's not just avoiding mistakes, it's fostering innovation.
Okay.
Those intuitive leaps, those aha moments, they often come from tacit knowledge.
So balancing the scientific method with intuition.
Exactly. And we need to preserve this knowledge.
Mm.
Those experienced veterans, they hold so much.
Right.
When they retire, that knowledge can be lost.
Like losing a library of experience.
Exactly. We have to capture it. Interviews, observations, mentoring.
So valuable but elusive. Any practical tips for capturing it?
Well, those in-depth interviews are key,
Right.
but active listening is crucial.
Okay.
Encourage the expert to really explain their thinking, every detail.
Be a research detective.
Yes. And when you're observing, pay attention to everything.
Everything.
How they organize their space, the questions they ask, their reactions.
Like those little details in a detective novel.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And create guidelines, frameworks, a shared document.
So we're turning individual insights into collective wisdom.
Exactly. And experiment. Test out their advice, see if it works,
Okay.
and always be reflecting. Why did that decision feel right?
Turn those aha moments into actionable insights.
Exactly. So, tacit knowledge, a bit of a mystery, but worth exploring.
Okay, I'm convinced. It's on my radar now. But before we wrap up,
Yeah.
we need to talk about one more type, the one that can really take research to the next level.
Strategic knowledge.
Strategic knowledge. What is that?
This is where we start thinking like chess players,
Okay.
anticipating moves, long-term goals, the big picture.
So it's about having that master plan.
Exactly. It's knowing which questions to ask, understanding the context, and making sure your findings are relevant.
So where do we find this strategic wisdom? Secret strategy summits.
Maybe. But start with policy documents.
Okay.
Government agencies, international organizations, think tanks,
Right.
they outline priorities and goals. That can reveal where research is needed.
So aligning our research with those big challenges.
Precisely. And in your own setting, academic or industry,
Mm-hmm.
pay attention to those strategic plans. Universities, companies, nonprofits, they all have them.
So our passions align with those larger goals.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And industry reports.
Industry reports.
Yeah, consulting firms, market research companies,
Right.
they analyze trends, forecasts, identify emerging opportunities.
So it's like having a crystal ball.
In a way, yes.
Uh-huh.
It helps you understand the landscape, stay relevant.
So it's more than chasing funding.
Right. It's about ensuring your research addresses real-world challenges.
Making sure our work has impact.
Exactly. And it can open doors, to funding, collaborations.
Right.
Funders want to see relevance.
Makes sense.
But it's not just short-term. Strategic knowledge is about the long view,
Okay.
anticipating future trends, those emerging challenges.
So we're future-proofing our research.
Exactly. But how do we apply this knowledge?
Right. It's one thing to read those reports, but how do we use it?
Well, translate those policy goals or trends into research objectives.
Okay.
For example, if there's a push for renewable energy and you're a solar expert,
Right.
you could frame your research to address specific targets in that policy.
So we're connecting our research to those needs?
Exactly. And collaborate with organizations already working in those areas. Joint projects,
Yeah.
data sharing, co-authoring.
Build that dream team.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to pivot.
Okay.
Stay informed, watch for changes, be willing to adjust.
So stay flexible.
Yes, the research landscape is always changing.
This has been an amazing deep dive.
Yes.
From facts to frameworks to tacit knowledge, it's all connected.
Like an orchestra.
Exactly. But before we move to the last type, I'm curious.
Yep.
We've talked about capturing tacit knowledge from experts,
Mhm.
but what if they can't really articulate it?
Ah, yes. Sometimes it's so ingrained, it's subconscious.
It's like asking a fish how it swims.
Exactly. We have to rely on observation,
Okay.
watch their actions, decisions, look for those patterns.
Become research detectives.
Precisely. It's like a puzzle with missing pieces.
It is. I'm starting to see tacit knowledge everywhere now.
It's fascinating, isn't it? The more we understand these types, the better our research becomes.
Okay, so we've got 6 types down. What's the final piece?
Metacognitive knowledge.
Metacognitive knowledge. That sounds very introspective.
It is. It's about understanding your own thinking process.
Okay.
It's like having an inner critic
Right.
that says, hold on, are we doing this right?
So it's self-awareness.
Exactly.
Huh.
Knowing your strength, weaknesses, potential biases.
Being able to see our own thinking in the mirror.
Precisely. And it's a skill you can develop.
How do we cultivate this?
Keep a research journal.
Okay.
Write down your thoughts, questions, doubts.
Shine a light on those hidden corners.
Exactly. And get feedback. Ask colleagues to challenge you.
So those critical friends are actually helpful.
They are. And sometimes just take a break.
Wait, are you saying procrastination is good?
Not exactly.
Yeah.
But stepping away can give you fresh insights.
Like stepping out of the forest.
Yes. And be willing to change your mind.
Okay.
Metacognition is about growth. Don't be afraid to admit you're wrong.
So intellectual humility.
Precisely. So, how does this lead to better research? Well, it helps you design more rigorous studies.
By understanding our biases.
Exactly. It's an internal quality control system,
Okay.
and it helps you communicate better. Be transparent about your limitations.
Acknowledging that research is a human endeavor.
Exactly. Leads to more honest conversations. Now, how do you know if you're doing it right?
Good question. Any signs?
Well, you ask more questions,
Okay.
you dig deeper, you probe those assumptions.
Never stop asking why.
Exactly.
Okay.
And you embrace uncertainty. Research is full of gray areas,
Right.
and you're constantly learning. Open to feedback,
Yeah.
willing to change.
So it's a process, not a destination.
Exactly. A lifelong journey for any researcher.
Okay, so we've explored all 7 types,
We have.
from facts to metacognition. It's amazing how they all work together.
It creates a more powerful approach.
It does. But I feel like we're not done yet.
You're right. We've talked
Yeah.
about the types,
Right.
but how do we actually integrate them?
Yes. How do we blend them to get those aha moments?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And that leads us to the next stage.
Yeah, it's like we've got this amazing toolkit, but now we need to know how to use all the tools together, right?
Exactly. Think of it like cooking. You've got all these amazing ingredients,
Yeah.
but you wouldn't just eat them all separately.
No, definitely.
That wouldn't be a very satisfying meal. The magic is in the combination.
Okay, I'm ready for some knowledge fusion. How do we actually blend these types?
Well, let's think back to that climate change example. You start with those hard facts.
Right, rising temperatures, emissions.
Yeah, but to make that research really stand out, you need to bring in those other types of knowledge.
Right, add some spice.
Exactly. So think about experiential knowledge.
Okay.
You could interview people affected by climate change, right?
Yeah, get their stories.
Their stories would bring it to life. Make those abstract statistics more relatable.
It's like reading a recipe versus tasting the dish.
Yes. And then you could layer in some procedural knowledge.
Okay.
Use those established methods to model future scenarios.
Right, like what happens if we don't reduce emissions?
Exactly. Combining stories with data and analysis.
Makes a strong case.
It does. And then don't forget the conceptual knowledge.
Right, those big frameworks.
Yeah, you could use those to understand the complex factors at play.
Yeah.
It gives your research more depth.
It's like weaving together a tapestry.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And even tacit knowledge has a role.
Oh, right. How so?
You could talk to experienced scientists, policymakers, tap into their expertise, their insights.
Get those insider tips.
Exactly. And of course, metacognitive knowledge guides everything.
Right. Always be reflecting.
Always. Making sure your research is rigorous and objective.
So it's like having that chef's intuition, but also that quality control system.
I like that analogy. Now let's shift gears a bit and talk about knowledge gaps.
Knowledge gaps. Everyone's got them.
Everyone. It's where our knowledge is incomplete or inconclusive.
Like blank spaces on a map waiting to be explored.
I like that. So how do we even find those gaps? They don't exactly advertise themselves.
Right. How do we know where to look?
Well, the literature review is your friend here. As you're reading, you'll start to see those unanswered questions, those areas where more research is needed.
It's like a reconnaissance mission, scoping out the terrain.
Exactly. And don't hesitate to talk to experts, go to conferences, network.
Hipping, always a good idea.
It is. And once you found those gaps, well, you need a plan to fill them.
Right. What kind of plan?
Maybe new research studies, new methods, even new collaborations.
So we're actively trying to push the boundaries.
Exactly. And speaking of collaboration,
Yeah, research isn't a solo sport, is it?
definitely not. Collaboration is key to making a real impact.
We need those research buddies.
We do. And it can take many forms, small teams, big consortia, online communities.
There's so many ways to connect.
There are. And it allows us to tackle those big, complex problems.
Or assembling the research Avengers.
Exactly. And remember, it's not just about sharing. It's about creating new knowledge.
Right, when those different perspectives come together.
That's where the magic happens.
I love that. This deep dive has been so eye-opening.
It's been a pleasure.
From knowledge types to gaps to collaboration, it's all connected.
It is.
And now we have the tools to use it all effectively.
That's the goal.
It is. So to everyone listening, think about your own research.
Yeah.
Which types do you use? Are there any you could explore further? How can you collaborate?
Great questions.
Keep those questions coming, keep learning, keep researching, and keep making a difference until next time.